The first patch note for Ladiva involves removing some jank that was in her kit before. Previously, the proximity range required to trigger a close attack from the opponent differed between whether or not Ladiva was airborne or on the ground. That's all been normalized now. So basically, if Ladiva is close enough on the ground for the opponent to get a close attack, even if she's in the air now, they're all going to get a close attack at that same range right now. I don't really have a great way of demonstrating this, and I think we don't really need a demonstration either. But it bears mentioning that, yeah, that's just been normalized and stabilized now. So you won't have any jank when it comes to playing around Ladiva's ranges, whether or not she's airborne or on the ground. Crouching U has a couple of changes to it, which overall result in the move being able to reach a little bit farther and giving Ladiva a couple more frames of advantage on hit. So let's go ahead and look at those. While the patch notes say that the startup has been reduced, it's not entirely like the truthful thing to say. At point blank range in the old patch, this would connect at frame 7. So your first active frame was, well, on frame 7. In the current patch, the first active frame this move connects on is still frame 7 at point blank. So it's not like this move has suddenly gotten faster in terms of her being able to use it as like a mashing option, which some skilled Ladiva players are quite obnoxiously good at. The patch notes themselves specify that they've increased the travel distance for Ladiva when she uses this move by reducing the startup and also having Ladiva come to a stop more quickly. This gives it a slightly more effective range than it had before, and I actually have a decent way of demonstrating this from around start position. If you whiff a far medium in the ult patch and then press 2U, Ladiva was just outside of range. In the current patch, 2U will now reach in this situation. It's a very small range increase, but one that definitely helps Ladiva out when it comes to wanting to use this poke as like a neutral tool of some sorts. The vertical hitbox has also been expanded, and my first thought was that this might help improve 2U as being an anti-air, but my testing doesn't seem to indicate as much, at least when it comes to anti-airing Grand's jump heavy. This is the old patch. Here's the current patch. The one thing I do note in this particular instance is that when I'm pressing 2U here, I'm less likely to get counter hit out of it and then giving the opponent a hard knockdown in this situation. Instead, I'm just getting punish countered, which is still a bad situation to be in, but not as bad as getting counter hit. I suppose the intent of this change is to make it more combo-friendly for Ladiva in some of her juggle routes. That being said, I'm not entirely sure where she would like to use this or in what routes, so maybe a more experienced Ladiva player could comment below to let us know about some new combos that she's able to get with this change. Ladiva's dashing heavy also has a buff as well. On counter hit, you have a couple extra frames to pick up your conversions. At around start spacing with nearly perfect inputs, you could get to be about plus 51 in the previous patch. Obviously, the frame advantage would vary based on where you would place the move. At point blank, for example, you'd only be plus 47 in this situation. Let's compare those to the current patch. This is round start spacing. Plus 54, so an increase of 3 frames. And at point blank, you're plus 49. So Ladiva should have an easier time picking up some of her combos from these ranges now. It's worth mentioning that there could be some new combo routes Ladiva can do that result in overall higher damage because she's able to link better, stronger moves in these situations as opposed to what she could not get to link before. I haven't been able to find anything like that in my own bit of testing, but I'm also not really going too in-depth with it right now. I do want to show off a couple of things at the very least. Namely, that this change and the changes to 2U don't really come together to give her any like new 2U links. Basically, if you could link 2U before, you could probably link it at the same spaces that you could. I will say that comboing into her EX and Ultimate Lariat does feel a little more consistent in my couple rounds of testing. Again, I think this is largely just a quality of life change to make sure that Ladiva doesn't sporadically drop a combo if you're a couple frames late on the input. So some leniency is appreciated. Let's start getting into some of the real meat of Ladiva's changes, and that has to do with her command throw Jewel Resort Screwdriver. Previously, the light version was 7 frame startup. Now, it's 5 frame startup. There's a lot of implications for this, and I'm going to try to cover a couple of noteworthy examples in the video. Compare that to before. That was a dual resort screwdriver in the previous patch. Ladiva couldn't press against the opponent's dagger options if they were +0. Now, the opponent has to be worried about eating a command throw from her. In the context of Ladiva's kit, this means that her fastest Abari option is now a dual resort screwdriver. She has a slower jab in the game. Her close light is 6 frame startup. Compare that to Gran, who has a 5 frame startup close light. Having a 5 frame Abari option does wonders for Ladiva's defense. Previously, opponents could bully her in +0 unblock situations if they had a 5 frame jab. Because Ladiva's jab was 6 frames, she was always at a disadvantage in +0 unblock situations. Gran's close medium is +0 on block, so this would have been the sequence that he could have done to pressure Ladiva before. You can't press here as Ladiva in the old patch, but with a new dual resort screwdriver startup, this is the situation now. Absolutely terrifying. Now the opponent's safest option in this situation is to go for a throw in these +0 on block situations, because if Ladiva commits to that dual resort screwdriver, she gets thrown on startup. So that changes the RPS. Throws are a lot more potent for the opponent to threaten, and Ladiva can play around that. Just to give you an idea. This also improves Ladiva's clash game because now she's able to threaten a 5 frame command throw to beat out the opponent's mash. Check out the situation previously. And this is the current situation. This also has the potential to punish quick reactions if the opponent defaults to a spot dodge because, well, you can grab spot dodges. Suffice it to say, Ladiva's quite dangerous in clashes now. Of course, if the opponent is close enough, then their regular throw is going to beat out a dual resort screwdriver. But if you're spaced out, well then, you're pretty much going to be pressing dual resort screwdriver in any of these situations if you're the Ladiva player. In addition to the buff to light dual resort screwdriver, the ultimate version had its range increased to match the light version. You could tick throw into the light version off of a triple attack sequence, namely just doing the first 2 attacks. Meanwhile, the ultimate version here whiffed. Now, with the increased range, you can tick throw into the ultimate version off of that sequence as well. A 5 frame option that does 4,000 damage. That's pretty terrifying. So everything we discussed so far with the light version of dual resort screwdriver also applies to the ultimate version. Previously, Work the Crowd, Ladiva's damage buff to her command throws, was a one-time use buff that would affect the next throw, so long as you weren't hit or whiffed a command throw in between those. You were +5, and because of the spacing in mid-screen, you didn't really see it used there. This is something that you could basically just use to buff your damage in the corner, but you'd always have to sacrifice Okizemi to get it. The next throw did 3,200 here, and now if I do another throw, we go back down to that 2,700. This basically meant that Ladiva could give up 25 frames of throw advantage, which is something that she could not afford to do in the mid-screen, in order to get the very next throw instance buff, if it even connected. Now, landing any of her command throws outside of her 5U, which doesn't interact with the Work the Crowd buff, no longer consumes the Work the Crowd buff. Instead, the buff lasts until Ladiva is either hit or she whiffs a command throw. This does massive gains for her snowball potential, especially because now she only needs to buff herself up once, and then as long as she's able to maintain her offense, all of her command throws are doing more damage to the opponent. It's also worth mentioning, too, that because she's +5 in the situation after she does her initial Work the Crowd buff, she's basically threatening with a 5 frame command throw now. Basically, if Ladiva gets started like this in the corner, you are guessing for your life now, and there's not really much you can do to try and mash and escape out of the situation. You're holding a strike throw mix. The light and medium version of Ladiva's air-to-air command throw, leg Drop of Adoration, has a massive buff. Previously, if the opponent was blocking an attack from Ladiva's, which basically meant that she was able to connect an air-to-air normal against you, she would not be able to go into this command throw because the opponent was in block stun. Now she's able to actually throw opponents in the air even if they're blocking an attack of hers, allowing her to hit and block string confirm this command throw in the air against an opponent. This does wonders for her air-to-air game. Additionally, the ultimate version of Leg Drop of Adoration had its forward throw range increased. It was pretty stubby in the old patch. This is what the new range can look like.
Excellent.
It's fairly noticeable in this particular setup. No doubt Ladiva is going to appreciate being able to link into this throw against an airborne opponent and punish them from greater ranges, incentivizing her using this move. The light, medium, and heavy versions of her Headbutt of Loves all have a couple of buffs to them. Let's go ahead and start with the universal one to these versions, which is going to be the amount of SBA gauge she generates. Previously, she would generate about 14% SBA gauge if she was able to successfully negate a projectile using them. Now, she generates an extra 6% SBA gauge, totaling up to 20%. 6% increase is a pretty big deal. Effectively, for every 2 projectiles she's able to parry, it's as if she parried 3 projectiles. Just shy of it, but effectively the same. Now the projectile immunity kicks in 13 frames earlier at frame 10 while she's winding up the headbutt. This gives her another option to negate fireballs, especially one that has a larger active window overall, and I think this is going to greatly increase her ability to deal with projectile matchups, especially characters like Matera, who are seeing a rise in popularity. The medium version of Headbutt of Love has a massive buff to its projectile invincibility window. It started at frame 23 in the previous patch and lasted to frame 33, meaning that at close quarters, Ladiva could not reliably use this version of Headbutt of Love in order to deal with projectiles. If she was winding up the animation, then she was going to get caught by a projectile before. The projectile invincibility frames of the initial strike of her EX headbutt has been standardized to match the medium version. So instead of starting at frame 11, it now starts at frame 10. More interesting for this part of her kit is going to be to the projectile immunity to her follow-up attacks. Previously, they kicked in at frame 9 and lasted to frame 20, giving her an 11-frame window. This meant that if she was facing a wall of projectiles from a character like Beelzebub, she really couldn't try to just headbutt her way through all of the projectiles that he could conjure. As you can see, if you keep on swinging, you're going to get caught at some point. Now, as far as her follow-up to EX Headbutt of Love is concerned, the projectile invincibility starts at frame 1. Basically, she can pretty much guarantee that she's able to power through any sort of projectile that the opponent manages to throw at her. This is a pretty big buff for her, as it means that she's able to consistently get through these projectiles, close the gap against the opponent, all the while building SBA gauge. It does something to help alleviate some of her hardest matchups, which is, of course, against the zoning archetype. Her ultimate Headbutt of Love has a slight rework to it. Previously, it was a slow unblockable move that would hit at frame 22. This basically served as a reaction/knowledge check in most of these situations, and at high levels of play, it really didn't see too much utility outside of trying to use it as a reversal for its iframes, but because of its slow startup, it could even sometimes fail at that, as the opponent could still potentially react and dodge it, or even cross over it. This is pretty bad for Ladiva. The move has been reworked to effectively make it a better reversal option for Ladiva. Instead of hitting at frame 22, it now hits at frame 16. You'll also note that it's now blockable, and while it is a guard crush option for Ladiva, it does give up her turn, putting the opponent at a +4 situation. The last thing to note about it, though, is that if the opponent tries to cross over this on reaction, they actually get caught. So again, it's sort of shifting this tool from being like a gimmicky guard crush option into more of a strong reversal tool for Ladiva. So I think this is something that, again, just overall helps her defense. It's also worth mentioning that the iframes now last until the last active frame. So again, I think the idea is just to give this option a little makeover to make it a strong reversal tool for Ladiva, as opposed to being something of a gimmick at times that really wasn't able to work as a means to open up the opponent as a mix-up option, nor was it effective as a reversal because you could just sometimes lose in situations because of when the iframes would run out on it. The light and medium version of Elegant Lariats now have more effective range because the travel speed and distance traveled have been increased on their final active frames. I'll go ahead and just show both of the old versions together, and then we'll look at both of the new versions. From a single backdash, this was the effective spacing from a light Lariat. And from a double backdash, this was the space for a medium Lariat. Now let's take a look at the spacing on the new versions. This is light from a single backdash. And this is medium from a double backdash. Substantially closer in both cases. One change I won't be able to effectively demonstrate is to her ultimate Elegant Lariat, which had an expansion to its upward hitbox against an opponent in midair hit stun. It should be more combo friendly now and fall out of combos less often, which is something that will greatly improve Ladiva's consistency. All of Ladiva's anti-air command throws, Devoted Body Slam, have received some buffs to their damage as well as the distance traveled. They've all had an increase of 500 damage, so the light version goes from 1,000 damage to 1,500, the medium goes from 2,000 to 2,500, and the heavy version goes from 2,500 to 3,000. I'll do this particular trick in some post-editing, but here's a side-by-side comparison of the screen carry for the medium version of Devoted Body Slam. In addition to their base damage buff, all versions of Devoted Body Slam now are also buffed by her Work the Crowd buff, which means that if you're able to go into her EX Jewel Resort Screwdriver and then follow up into her ultimate Devoted Body Slam, you get an extra 500 damage on both of those throws due to the buffs on Work the Crowd. As you might imagine, this just means that Ladiva is even better at snowballing whenever she's able to get her offense rolling with her command throws. Let's take a look at this damage on the sequence when she did not have the Work the Crowd buff applying to her Devoted Body Slam. $5,800 damage in the old patch. In the new patch, you do 6,100 damage in that sequence. An increase in 300 damage in that particular sequence may not seem like much, but I can't stress how important it is just to be able to kill the opponent in fewer touches, as well as to reach your kill thresholds earlier, or be able to force a guess for game mix-up one situation faster for the opponent and the pressure that can put on. I'm kind of surprised all of these buffs didn't work in tandem before for Ladiva. It just seems like a natural evolution that I'm surprised that it took this patch for all this to come together to behave like this. Not to mention as well that for when Ladiva is just able to combo into these throws, if she's able to first get that buff onto herself, she's doing just more damage overall, making her an even more potent threat once she's able to get into her ideal range, if she's able to maintain the snowball. Just due to the frame advantage that you have after you get the Work the Crowd buff, I think this is something that you're only going to see Ladiva go for when she has corner positioning, and she's going to have to settle for trying to make use of her 30 frames of advantage in the mid-screen. But again, anything to make a command grappler's game more terrifying in the corner is a good thing for the command grappler and terrifyingly bad for anyone fighting that command grappler. Mentioning that the input buffer window has been increased for Ultimate Devoted Body Slam when you're canceling from a heavy Jewel Resort Screwdriver or a heavy leg Drop of Adoration. Making that input easier to execute just means that Ladiva is more consistent overall, which again, her player base is going to appreciate. Personally, in my own testing, I was sometimes dropping that link in the old patch, but it's pretty free for me in the new patch now. The throw range on her Super Maximum Love Bomb, the throw version, has been extended. As it's kind of difficult for me to see, I'm just going to go ahead and put these two side by side so that we can see if there's an increase in range. Lastly, Ladiva's Super Skybound art, The Shape of Love, has an increase in its damage. Since there's going to be some calculations happening with the Brave counters, as this is a Super Skybound art that strips away 2 points from it, I'll just do a quick little comparison between the versions that you get when the opponent is at max Brave counter points. Base damage increased from 5,200 to 5,600. In a match, this means previously, Ladiva, with the 20% damage buff, would do 6,240 damage in the old patch. And in the new patch, she would do 6,720 damage, so an increase in almost 500 damage for her. Again, all of these ties together with the rest of her damaging options and the increase that she has to make it so that she's able to kill the opponent faster in a lot of situations. Across the board, Ladiva has a lot of very important buffs to her kit. She does more damage, she's able to snowball better. Elements of her worst matchups have been reduced a little bit because her headbutts are more reliable and a fireball tools that give her more resources for when she finally gets in, she's able to really start cashing out on things. It's a pretty big patch for Ladiva, honestly, and while I don't think she's going to be a top tier character, I do think that she is going to be vastly stronger compared to her previous iteration, especially when it comes to some universal system mechanic changes. I mean, the fact that she has a 5-frame meterless command throw to threaten in situations like Clash or +0 just makes her a threat where if you get close to her, you're fighting for your life even when she's on defense against it. I think this is going to be probably one of the best patches for Ladiva going forward. It just sort of depends on what the metagame for her looks like. I think the good, patient Ladiva players, though, are going to be eating pretty big in this patch and could probably make some really deep tournament runs overall. We'll see how things go for her, but honestly, Ladiva stocks, they're looking up.